This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Jonathan Pascual of Taproom Coffee and Beer in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and thank you so much for joining me today as we're talking with the owner of Taproom Coffee and Beer, Jonathan Pascual. We get to hear the story of the founding of this business, recent expansion, and all the details in between, and you're not going to want to miss it, so stay tuned for that. Now, real quick, if you have not yet subscribed to Keys to the Shop, I would really encourage you to do so. That way, when a new episode comes out, you will not miss it. It'll just pop up in your phone, and you will be up to date. And if you have the opportunity to leave a rating or review for the show, I would greatly appreciate that. And of course, if something resonates with you and you love the content here in this show, be sure to share this with your friends in coffee. So today's episode is brought to you by the great people over at Prima Coffee. Now, I'm a really big fan of Prima Coffee. They are one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers, and they seriously curate the best equipment from around the world to fit perfectly with the needs of their customers, whether they're home baristas or professional coffee people running coffee bars. Prima Coffee has an amazing selection to choose from and awesome service as well. I would really encourage you to visit their website, prima-coffee.com. And not only are you going to see what I mean when I say they curate the best equipment, you'll see they have an amazing array of equipment, but they also have an equally amazing stockpile of resources in the form of videos and articles that help you understand and use that equipment properly. Helping you succeed in making great coffee is what drives them. So if you're looking for the best equipment and expert assistance to go along with it, then look no further than prima-coffee.com. Whether espresso machines, brewers, under-counter refrigeration, they have what you need at prima-coffee.com. Be sure to let them know that you heard about them on this show. This episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. Now, not only is this the original, but this is the leader in plant-based performance beverages worldwide. These products are designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they demand from what they use behind the bar. Whether you choose to use the Barista Series almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk, its ability to take the heat from the steaming process, produce awesome texture conducive for latte art or just an amazing drink, and keep the flavor of the beverage focused on coffee. All of this and more makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific is a champion for baristas worldwide, and this product is obviously a testimony to that fact. I would highly encourage you, go get these products in your store and test them out for yourself and see what I mean. Visit pacificfoods.com to learn more, and thank you so much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. All right, so today we get the pleasure of talking with Jonathan Pascual, who is the founder and owner of Taproom Coffee and Beer in Atlanta, Georgia. This is an amazing cafe that I had the pleasure of visiting years and years ago. And all these years later, I'm really happy to get an opportunity to dive into the story of Taproom Coffee and Beer and find out what makes it tick and the owner, Jonathan Pascual. So Jonathan has been in the coffee industry for quite a long time. After spending time working as a Starbucks barista, he quickly pivoted into helping other people open their coffee bars. Got a lot of really great experience with some high-level folks that we'll be talking about in this conversation as you learn the story. But in 2014, opened Taproom Coffee and Beer, which is an espresso and craft beer bar located in Atlanta, Georgia. Jonathan also serves as a coach and consultant for entrepreneurs and coffee startups. He has a passion for genuine personal connection and helping other people discover and fulfill their life's calling. Jonathan strives to maintain a healthy balance between business and being involved in the community, church, and living a joy-filled life with his wife and 4 children. This is obviously the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what we discover about Taproom in this conversation and how it got started and how it's run and the values that are infused into it. We cover so much in this conversation. Of course, that is what we do here in these Founder Friday episodes, from the decision to start a coffee bar, how he went about getting funding, hiring, management, how to balance, just like we just said here, how to have a healthy balance between business and your personal life. And that's a theme that you're going to find throughout this conversation. And it's something I think a lot of coffee entrepreneurs, or just generally entrepreneurs worldwide, are trying to get. And I love that, Jonathan has such an emphasis on this and has a lot of success behind him to back up the fact that you too can do this. So let's get right into it today. I'm so honored to present this conversation with Jonathan Pascual, owner of Taproom Coffee and Beer. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me on Keys to the Shop. It's exciting to get to talk to you.
I'm really excited to be on the show.
Yeah, we were talking before the conversation about how this is, day 3 of your second store.
Right, yeah. We just opened this week our first expansion, new shop, and so I'm kind of a little bit tentative being away from there, but I am excited to do this interview and then maybe head over there afterwards.
Yeah, does it feel like being a new parent?
Always, yeah. As coffee shop owners would say, these are our babies, and so it's one thing to say my baby is off by itself and without me holding his hand.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that shop as we have this conversation. But give us some history about yourself, and you're the owner of the Taproom, and now with 2 stores. But where did you first start in coffee, and what in your experiences led you to start your own coffee shop?
Yeah, I guess for me, the story starts maybe 15 years ago. So growing up, I didn't drink any coffee. I thought that a cappuccino came out of a powdered packet that my parents put into cups and stirred with some water and milk. And so I had a lot to learn. And 15 years ago, I was in this tent in the middle of the Amazon jungle with a friend of mine, and we were just chatting and musing about life in the future. And we said, hey, it would be really cool to open a coffee shop one day, maybe when we're retired. And it was this crazy, just random conversation. And then when we both came back to the States, we both started working for Starbucks. And I never opened a coffee shop with that friend, but the only thing I knew to do was to go to the nearest Starbucks and ask for a job, and they were hiring. And so that's when I started into coffee, got to know how it tasted, got to know things about the industry, and really in the back of my mind was working on a rough business plan, and even got that on paper a little bit. But worked for them for 2 years, and then randomly ran into someone who said, hey, I'm starting a coffee shop for this nonprofit organization, and you said you were interested in starting one day. You want to do it for me? And that coffee shop was my first opportunity to open up and manage a coffee bar for somebody, and one where I had 100% of the responsibility and 0% of the financial risk. So I thought it was a great opportunity. And that shop is now a Chattahoochee Coffee Company in Atlanta, and they have 3 locations now. At the time, it was this really small shop on the Chattahoochee River. But yeah, I learned and went. I got to, with that shop, do permits and build out, choose all the equipment, hire and train a staff, and suffer all the dead months and low sales for long periods of time. And then that shop got turned over to ownership to Land of Thousand Hills Coffee. They're out of Atlanta as well. And so I worked for them. That was the next step, and was able to manage their shop and gain that increased management experience, and actually got to open up another coffee bar for them in another area of Atlanta. And from there, moved again to open a coffee shop for someone else. So I had the privilege of opening up the coffee bar for Empire State South, Chef Hugh Atchison here in Atlanta, and got that coffee bar going. And after a year, left there to be a stay-at-home dad. And so I had one daughter at the time, and really still had this far-off dream of owning my own coffee shop. Knew that for the time being, I wanted to build my family and be with my daughter as she grew up. And when she was a couple years old, we adopted 2 other kids. And then not soon after that, or not too long after that, we had a 4th child. And so it was in the middle of all that chaos that the right opportunity, the right place, at the right time came up for me to finally open my own shop. And that's where we are today. It's been 6 years since we opened.
6 years?
Yes.
Wow. Congratulations. And it's really interesting that 2 years after you became a barista, you are getting these opportunities to take on such mammoth responsibilities that a lot of people they just don't get those kind of opportunities. And once you were in that stream, it seems like you really just stayed in that lane. And interestingly enough, the right time, as you say, was it a time where, by your description, a lot of people would say that's not the right time
that's
to
right.
open a coffee shop.
It was pretty crazy to say yes to a location, to sign a lease, to start the journey of being a business owner in a time when most people would just hunker down and just make sure they survived and paid bills.
Well, why was it the right time? I mean, in terms of on paper, looking again at your situation, what made you think, okay, in spite of all of this other stuff that calls for my attention at home, et cetera, this is the right opportunity? What was the distinction there?
Well, the part of Atlanta that we ended up being in, it's an area that it looked like it was primed for all of this development or redevelopment. And so at the time when I signed the lease, there was this little downtown district of this neighborhood of Atlanta that looked very promising. And the feeling in Atlanta was these in-town historic neighborhoods would become revitalized. And when I saw a space open for lease, I think a friend of mine saw it, or maybe my wife saw it. This really ended up being, okay, this feels right. This feels like this is the right time to get into it. And if we pass it up now, this won't come around again. And that ended up being true. If we had waited a year or 2 years, the space would have been snatched up and someone else would have started some other kind of business there. Maybe a coffee shop, maybe something different. But it really was the exact right neighborhood, the right place in that neighborhood at the right time, where there was going to be a boom of development and growth and construction and businesses. And I've just ridden that wave. It was nothing that I started myself, but was able to respond to in a timely manner.
Well, you got to jump in to ride the wave, right? And so you had to have been paying attention the whole time that you were not technically in coffee, but you were keeping yourself sort of ear to the railroad to see what was coming this whole way. And you knew also, it sounds like, from the experience that you had before, of the kind of things that go into the recipes that go into having a good location, like what makes a good location work and not work.
That's right. And I think that as far as knowing the area geographically, I'm born and raised in Atlanta, and I know that's a rarity now with the transient population that we have, but this is my home. The city is. And so knowing Atlanta and knowing how coffee has come through the last maybe 15 years that I've been a part of it, I saw, okay, this is the right place for a specialty coffee shop, an independent place, a good little neighborhood shop to go in this specific location. And it took a familiarity with the area. My wife and I had been part of starting a church literally down the street that year or the year prior to us opening up Taproom. And so we were able to just use that familiarity with the neighborhood, knowing the neighborhood will respond incredibly positively to this, and we can be a part of that community and part of that neighborhood in a very healthy way.
Yeah, because you were already a part of the community.
Right.
So when you sign a lease and you take this first step, you got to have money. How did you go about getting your funding for this shop? It couldn't have been on like save tips from Starbucks and things like that.
No way, especially when I was getting less than $1 an hour in tips from Starbucks. But it's a huge endeavor financially to start a business, any business, and coffee shops are no exception. And so my startup costs total, the estimated costs were one level, and the reality was they ended up being over $250,000. And I don't have that. I didn't have that at the time. I still don't have that. And I knew that even if I sunk in every penny I had, I still need help. And so I did what a lot of other people do. I used every penny of savings and then asked friends and family who I would not offend even if I didn't pay them back. And then asked others to loan me money who maybe I would offend if I didn't pay them back. And then went out from there. So the people who were close to me, and then the people who were friends of friends, and did a lot of personal loans. So we did a combination of funding streams. With my own money, we financed a good bit of the coffee equipment and refrigeration. We did a little bit of a Kickstarter campaign, so some crowdfunding. And then that went off way better than I So we had an original $15,000 goal, thinking, who's going to support a little neighborhood coffee shop, and ended up overfunding. We funded the goal in 7 days, and then made out with over $20,000 in the end.
Excellent.
And that was just one part of the total funding, and it was actually a smaller part than most people think. The biggest chunk came in some of the bigger personal loans that had to be higher interest. And then even with all that, I had to make up for almost $50,000 with really high interest personal bank loans. And those killed me with the payments in the short run until I was able to consolidate those and pay those off. But in the end, again, maybe over $250,000. And I don't recommend actually doing it exactly how I did. I think that someone who is looking to get into this should know the reality of loans and debt, and how much you should really have your own money or free money as much as you can. But looking back, I wish I would have held out either to save more or to get an SBA backed loan that I could get at a lower interest and a bigger chunk all at once, so I didn't have to worry about it even through the opening months.
So what about your build out? Did you think, I'm trying to figure out a great way to ask this question, but you said it cost $250,000 to build what you wanted to build. Did you ever think maybe I shouldn't build parts of it?
Certainly the thought crossed my mind, and the physical build out and renovations of our location was the biggest chunk of that startup cost. And I think I made the mistake of choosing a place that was not already a restaurant or beverage bar, or didn't have the bones for the kind of place that I was going to make it. So it costs way more money to change the use of the space. And that was in the bar build out, and then also in the permitting. And so the costs for our build out skyrocketed once we figured out we had to do so many changes. So again, looking back, I would probably choose a different place, choose some place that was already a coffee bar, or maybe even just a restaurant, so that it had a grease trap, so that it had the right kinds of bathrooms and kitchen and all of that. But we had to put all that in from nothing, from a shell, to getting it to where it could serve as a coffee shop.
I bet you that's a conversation you have with a lot of people I know you do consulting for people starting coffee shops as well. Mm-hmm. That's probably a conversation you have a lot.
That's a huge part of that. I mean, so much goes into, people say location, location, location. And that's not just the geographic location, but the actual unit itself and how suitable that is for what you want to do. And if it's not suitable, factoring that in, it's going to cost some money to convert the space. And maybe sometimes, often, it might be a better idea to actually wait it out and find a more suitable place that won't cost you as much to renovate.
Putting that dream on hold, especially when you have momentum, is not that easy. But I'm glad that you came through the other end. Your space is amazing. I've been there, and it's a really great experience. You've got craft beer and coffee as your concept, a la the Taproom, and you've got that really cool, I hope you still have it, that La Marzocco linea that's outfitted as a tap. Yeah,
so this ended up being this really fun project that has really become visually a centerpiece that encapsulates at least the projected concept and image of what Taproom coffee is. And so what we did is I found an old, unused, gathering dust in a storage closet, 4-group linea that maybe I think was in a Starbucks before, and got someone to sell it to me just for kind of less than what even the metal costs. And I took it in my garage and snipped wires and gutted it, and then dropped in an insulated beer tap insert. And so we were able to, out of the same body, the shell of the linea, we kept the drip tray and even the grates and everything, and we're able to have 12 taps on there for draft. And we installed a beer glass rinser into one corner of the drip tray, and just made it look really nice with a panel of metal. And then out of that old linea comes beer now. So David Lamont from Counterculture Coffee, he coined the term beer espresso. And so we said, hey, that's great. We'll call it the beer espresso machine. And so out of an espresso machine comes beer and now coffee products as well. So we have three non-beer lines in there that we run our nitro coffee and tea products out of.
That's so killer. That's really awesome. And I want to know why you chose to have this combination concept of beer and coffee. Is it something that you'd made as a business decision based on what the market wanted, or is it a personal passion of yours?
I think it really came about from my experience at the time when I was opening up my own place. So the idea was always to have a coffee bar, but then starting with when I worked for Empire State South, it was my first time really working at a place and seeing an alcohol bar in parallel to a coffee bar, and seeing, wow, there's a lot of overlap here. There's a lot of overlap with the barista bartender culture, but then a lot of overlap between the craft beer industry, which I started being on the fringes of, and then the specialty coffee industry. And both of those were in their almost infancy and emergence in Atlanta, craft beer and specialty coffee. And I saw that those were really sister industries. So there's a lot that is common to those two. There are harvests, and there's roasting, and there's brewing. There's similar ways of describing beverages. There's communities and collaboration, camaraderie with people who are in those industries. And so when time came to open up my own place, I said, well, no one's really done this dual concept of coffee beer, at least in Atlanta. And I knew I could be one of the first to do that in our city, and would have a unique concept that hopefully would stick and work in our favor for years.
So how has it been received? I mean, I imagine positively, but at first, was it a hit?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning, it did what I wanted it to do, which was when someone said, okay, Taproom, oh, that's that coffee and beer place. And so it had this image and this concept, this identity where people knew us as a place where it was coffee and beer. And that's reflected in our name, in the logo, in the way that we present things. In all actuality, and this is an open confession, our beer sales are less than 10% of our overall sales. But in the concept, maybe has a more equal footing with coffee. And I think it's because of that really cool, catchy identity. And it sticks in people's heads, and they say, oh, they have this coffee espresso machine that was converted to a beer draft tower. And then they can say to their friends, yeah, the coffee and beer place. And so it has a lot of use for us in a really positive way, in the way that people remember our business and remember who we are. And I love that people get to point to that. And so we do the beer very well. So we still are a part of that craft beer industry, but the primary identity is in specialty coffee.
So how different is it setting up a bar and running a bar with beer and coffee versus just coffee? I imagine your experience at Hugh Atchison's place played a part in how you're able to accomplish that now, but is it kind of a learning curve that you had to get over at first?
It is, and I think the biggest one was in design. And so from the beginning, I knew it was going to be a beer and coffee place. So I had to account for that when we were doing all of our design and in plumbing and electrical work. I had to get a bigger cooler because instead of just gallons of milk, it would have to house these huge kegs. And then we had to put a beer trunk line into the floor and get it to the bar where we would have our draft tower. And so bar layout and such was a big part of the difference between beer and coffee and then just coffee. And then there's all the licensing. It's really expensive, certain aspects of the alcohol permitting. And then the equipment that's involved, getting a draft beer system in there, getting all things that regulate your gas. And so all of that is different from setting up a more simple coffee bar. But I think that overall, there's enough similarity between the operations of any other beverage bar and a coffee bar that I could borrow from what I'd already learned and then just tweak it a little bit and then have it in beer bar alongside our coffee bar.
Neat. And so the permitting part of it seems like, from a lot of people's testimony, a kind of a big headache.
It is. It's really difficult to get an alcohol permit probably anywhere. And for me, I made the mistake of saying I wouldn't use an expediter, and I did it all myself. So I went to the neighborhood meetings and went to the permitting offices and the police department and fumbled my way through the application. Ended up with a license that I could take and put on the wall, but I think it could have been a whole lot easier if I just asked for help.
So there are people that act as intermediaries that you can get to help you navigate the waters of serving alcohol.
Well, any permitting really. And so for anyone out there who's trying to do building permits to open up a new space or renovation of a space, I would really recommend using expediters because they can make it happen in maybe weeks versus a year, or they at least will do it faster than you can.
It's interesting. I'm thinking about what you put into your store and the cost, et cetera, up front. But in my mind, I'm always thinking about preventative maintenance and issues with equipment as a cost further down the road. As easy as it is to put an espresso machine in there and all the other kinds of coffee equipment, it seems like there's more risk with the coffee equipment long term than the beer equipment.
Maybe so. I think that the coffee equipment I'm familiar with, though, and so knowing how to maintain, or at least how to work the schedules for the maintenance and partnering with technicians and service companies that will take care of us. It's not as big of a risk. You just calculate that up front and say, I have to put this money into properly maintaining our systems and then save for replacing them when they will break down, because they inevitably will.
Mm. So what we've talked about a lot of things, I think, that are hurdles, the permitting, getting your space built out to be a beverage bar than it previously was not. What about this process was actually remarkably easy compared to what you thought it might be, where you thought, oh man, this is easier than I expected it to be?
I think that actually it was the level of sales and our customer base that came easier than I had feared. Because aside from Starbucks, all the other shops I worked at and ran, all the independent ones, they were pretty low volume compared to healthy specialty coffee shops out there. And so with Taproom, I was pleasantly surprised that our starting customer base was so robust. It was much higher than expected from day one. And of course, all my expenses were higher than expected as well. But from the beginning, it wasn't a struggle to get customers into the door. And I was extremely thankful for that. We had such a great response from our neighborhood community of Kirkwood in Atlanta, and then great response from Atlanta in general, and especially the specialty coffee community. And so I was able to benefit from this community of people around me who maybe I had underestimated their enthusiasm in supporting us as business.
Well, okay, so you got these customers, and that's fantastic that you were so well received. There's so much a load off your mind, because all the money that's dollar signs in your head about what's going to cost to pay quarterly taxes, etc. You're hoping that you have that kind of flow of traffic. What do you do, and what have you done to keep those customers and build that customer base so it's more likely that you can sleep at night, night after night, and know that you've got these folks and they are fans of your shop? It doesn't just happen accidentally, because you could have just screwed it up later on by faltering in a system or two on the menu, etc. What does it look like to keep those customers around? How do you plan that out?
There's no magic bullet. I think people are looking for that all the time. How do I build a thriving coffee shop business? But I think for me, it comes down to the personal relationships. And that sounds cheesy, but knowing that I know how to be someone's friend. And so can I do that with my customers with this drink between us, where I made a commitment to make that drink as tasty as possible and give it to them in a timely manner and be consistent with that day after day. But my focus isn't on that drink and excluding the personal aspects of it. And so if I can focus on that relationship and on that person and validating them as a human being and as a neighbor, then I know that has long-term sustainability, because relationships can last longer than the cup of coffee that gets down at the bottom and then it's done. And so I think if I focus on that person, so we attempt to know our customers as much as we would know our friends, to know them by name, not just by drink. And so that carries through in a lot of the systems that we have and the ways that we try to approach customer service. We try to quiz each other about people's names and oh, wait, you had a job interview, right? And then asking about that. And that's in addition to our prompt speed of service and drink quality being maintained at a good level. But we're not going to say nerding out on coffee is going to get us the best coffee shop and repeat customers. It may, but our focus at Taproom is more on the personal relationship, being a neighbor to them, being a part of the community, knowing people, knowing their lives, knowing their names, as much as we know their drinks and how they take their latte.
So that's a culture that you curate in your stores, and it's part of just the way that you do hospitality.
I think it is. And that's the aspect that relates to the customer. I think I just have just as much responsibility with my staff, because if they're not being taken care of, no way that's going to spill out over into the customer interaction experience. And so there's a big responsibility on me to make sure that my employees, that my managers, my baristas, that they all are taken care of in life, so that they have that they don't have to worry about. And then they can focus on the customer and they can build a relationship. And so I have to pay them a fair wage, and I have to take care of them and in terms of scheduling healthily and treating them with respect, and knowing that they are not just a barista, they are again a person. And so helping them thrive in every area of life holistically, and knowing that all that is part of my customers getting a good experience in my shop.
That's really great. It was bringing up for me that part of the book that you've probably read by Danny Meyer, Setting the Table, and it's describing how his restaurants were consistently rated in the Zagat Guide in New York as people's favorite. And sometimes they didn't get voted the best, but to him, it was the ultimate win was to be people's favorite because of how the customers felt when they were there, the way they were treated when they were there. And I mean, obviously, you hit the nail on the head with being able to take care of your staff and pour into them. And have said maybe on this show and also to other people who I've talked to about training and how to interact with your staff as a manager or owner, like your staff are your customers in a way. Like your staff have their customers, and as you become a little bit more distant from the day-to-day operations, as you grow, your staff increasingly and always are kind of your customers, as if they were going to a coffee shop called Jonathan, and that's sort of a great mentality. And I'm sure that your staff really appreciate that and stick around for that.
For sure. I think I like to think of my staff as, I don't know if this is a great way to put it, but almost ambassadors. And so they're the ones who are going to champion our company, our brand, our product. And if they don't really believe in that, you can't fake that with people, or you can't fake it for long. They're going to call you out on it. And so if I can have them genuinely appreciative of us as a business, as a company, and of me personally, that will affect how they're going to relay that to the customer. It'll affect their facial expressions and how they carry themselves behind the bar, and all of those intangible, minute things all add up to what the total customer experience will be for an individual person. And they might not be able to identify what it is exactly, but it is the combination of all those things and the ways you take care of people that end up with the customer saying, "Hey, I like this place, and it's maybe my favorite," or "I like this out of one of the few places I go in this city."
Well said. Yeah. And so much of that is based on decisions that you make in the hiring process, which is something I want to talk about a little bit. We sometimes in coffee have pressure to make quick decisions about hiring to fill the schedule out based on sometimes lack of time management. And so we just figure, this person seems good, and I'm just going to put them in place, and it might not be the right fit, but at least the schedule is filled out. And we inherit so much problems. We inherit so many problems because of the mismatch. And it's not good for you. It's not good for the employee, because they could be doing great work somewhere else. How do you go about finding great people? In particular, when you first started out, what were your standards for the people that you wanted to have be the ambassadors for your company? Has that changed much over the years?
I'd say it's actually stayed pretty consistent. From the beginning, I knew that I couldn't just hire based on experience. I had hired enough people for other staffs up to that point where I knew experience didn't always equal the employee. But I had some guiding principles. I've always had guiding principles with who I invite to be part of the team. And at the top of that list is probably the maturity of that individual and then their personability. So if I can engage with them in a very short conversation interview and they are likable in general and can carry on a conversation and they make me interested in who they are and make it to where I feel like they're interested in who I am as well, or maybe our company, then I know that that's a better shot of getting a really good employee rather than saying the resume looks great and they fit the availability, and so I'm going to hire them and plug it in. Because I've done that, and it has probably never gone well. And so I tend to get disappointed when I make compromises and don't prioritize the individual's maturity and personability. And so I've learned to really trust my gut, and anyone I have really gut check reservations about, I should probably say no to them and not compromise on that general feeling from that first impression. And that usually serves me pretty well. I have a lot of turnover like other coffee shops do, just the nature of the industry. But I have my baristas who have stuck around a long time, and the ones I started with, none of them are actually still with me, but several of them have gone on to either start their own companies or manage other coffee shops. So I know I haven't burned them, and they've proven to use the time at Taproom to launch into bigger and better things, and I'm happy for them in that.
So in particular, I know that you've got somebody who is now a core roaster that you use who used to work for you. To talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's Jared Carr of East Pole. And so Jared was part of our opening crew. We only had 8 baristas, including me, when we opened our doors 5.5 years ago. And Jared, he came into the interview, and I like to joke around and say he was a punk kid who thought he knew everything and who said in the interview, I want to start my own coffee roasting company. And so a lot of times that's off-putting, and maybe other owners would have dismissed him and not hired him, but I kind of liked him and hired him, and he worked for me for 2 years. And I worked many bar shifts with Jared. We learned and grew together over coffee shop management philosophies, espresso extraction, brewing technique. I even invited him to my church, and we played Ultimate Frisbee together. And my wife and I did his premarital counseling. We actually became great friends. And when the time came, he left Taproom to start a coffee roasting company. So he had actually just used a Whirly Pop and then a Gene Cafe roaster that I lent to him. And then he upgraded to a more commercial roaster and started roasting out of a garage. And he said, all right, I can't work bar shifts anymore. I'm going to go full on with this company. And when they upgraded to a permanent facility, I knew he was doing it right. And I supported his dream even more by saying, all right, you'll be our primary coffee roasting partner. We were actually with Counterculture at the time, who I've been with for many shops. And I said, I believe in you this much that I'm going to say we're going to transfer our partnering roaster relationship to you, and then entrusted him with that. So they roast most of our coffee for brewing and for retail, and we use them for training, for support, for tech support, and we are still good friends, and I see him often. We have a good professional relationship with partnering coffee companies now, and I think it's a fun story to share, and one I'm really proud of his journey and how he came through it all.
That's a lovely story. What a way to see things come full circle and to support a former employee like that, a former employee and friend. And that's a lot of trust that you're putting into this company. And I want to stay on that a little bit because you were using Counterculture, and Counterculture is great. Counterculture is a very consistent product. They have, they're one of the best in the world. And as an owner, when you're making that decision to switch over to a brand new coffee roasting company as your core roaster versus Counterculture, what kind of things did you think about in terms of risk? Did that cross your mind, and what made you sort of cross that gulf and make that decision?
I think it's actually a huge risk. And the first shop I opened, again, which is now Chattahoochee Coffee Company, they still use Counterculture. I started with them then, and then continued to use them at other shops that I worked at. And I love Counterculture. The Counterculture Training Center in Atlanta is where I probably gained most of my coffee knowledge and experience through cuppings and through trainings. And so it was a hard decision to say, I leave that behind and then trust these new guys. But I knew Jared. I knew where he'd come from, his journey over the last couple of years at the time when he was working for me. And I knew that there was a uniqueness in the identity of their company that I couldn't get with Counterculture or other great roasters that are out there. So East Pole has a tagline that's even on the bottom of their bags and on the t-shirts that say "From Atlanta." And so Jared and I are both from Atlanta, and it's a badge of pride to be able to say we started these coffee companies that are Atlanta. That this is where we're from, and this is where we started our businesses, and we get to say, hey, here's a great local coffee company that is still high quality, and maybe not doing all the things that Counterculture does and can do with their sourcing and roasting and training and pushing the industry forward. But this company is my neighbor, and these are guys who are working for this company who I have actually trained up as baristas in my shop, and so there's that personal connection there. And so their head trainer also was a barista at our shop at one point. Whit Hageman, and so Jared and Whit and others who work with them, I know these guys, and I love having that personal connection and saying, yes, this coffee was roasted in Atlanta. If you want to go visit their shop, just hop in a car. You'll be there in 20 minutes. And so it's really cool to be able to have that joint hometown identity with them.
Truly a local endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you're talking about growth in your company and where you are now, 6 years later, you've seen the growth in your staff. East Pole is a great testimony to that. Your own shop expanding into this new store that we were just talking about at the beginning of this conversation, the 3-day-old baby that you have. I want to talk about that expansion because, it's been a while since you've had this one store. Has it become so, I don't want to say routine, but it's been a while since you've opened a store. So was this sort of like, got to shake the rust off, or did all the operations that you had to undergo to keep the one store open, did all those just like fit seamlessly with this opportunity and it just kind of went off without a hitch?
Well, I don't think it ever goes off without a hitch. There are always unique hurdles and challenges for any new business, new location, any expansion. This opportunity came up really organically. So I have a friend who works for school. It's Mount Vernon School in Atlanta. And he connected me with a teacher who was looking for someone who worked for a coffee company who could help students with a project. So there's these high school students who had this crazy idea to start a coffee shop in their school. And they didn't know anything about coffee shops or coffee business or the product. And so they brought me along, and I was able to come in and speak to their class, speak to their group, tell them about cost of goods sold and profitability and many lessons in those and research and information on the specialty coffee industry. And for 2 years, walked alongside these students. They came out and visited Taproom as well. And by the end of that couple of years, they had pitched this idea to the administration that when they constructed their new high school building, that maybe they could put in a coffee bar. And then the administration went for it. And so
Wow.
They have this really amazing new modern multi-million-dollar facility that is their high school building now. And they said, hey, you've helped these students out. Can you help us design it and choose what equipment to use? And so I did, and they brought me out there, and they said, now when you run this place, and then I had to stop and say, wait a minute, I'm going to run it. And through a lot of conversations, it just seemed like the right fit. And so I moved forward with them, and it's been a really awesome partnership, and one where we hope to continue that connection with the students' academic programs. And so I had that supervising teacher come to me last week and said, okay, now can we do a lesson on maximizing profits? I have some students who we could work with you on doing this, and we'd love to do that. And if the shop is profitable, we're going to pay back into the school and maybe do some scholarship funds, maybe even some work opportunities with students, even do cash handling and running the register. For now, our business, Taproom, is the one running this coffee shop as more or less an outside vendor. So I have 3 staff members who moved from our main location, Taproom, to now this other one where, of course, there's no beer. There are no beer craft lines, and it's not part of the name. They came up with the name, the Ground Floor Coffee Company. It's on the ground floor of the building, and students were in on the idea from the ground floor, so it's a cool story behind that, and the coffee pun. But it's been a lot of fun and well received so far. We're on our third day of operation, and so we're seeing how the community on campus is responding to it. And so far it's incredibly positive, and I think that it's wide open of our opportunities of how we can grow this, how we can help out students in their education, and how we can be a positive presence in that community as well.
So are you going to have students working there pretty soon?
I don't know about pretty soon. We've spoken with the school staff about maybe weaving that in after we do this first year of just seeing how it's going to go. And I would love to be able to train some students in different aspects. I mean, maybe it's running a register, maybe it's making coffee, maybe it is students who are working on a design project and need to test out, some of their graphic design skills, and then we put it in some of our promotional material. And so there's a lot of different avenues available to us with this coffee being part of a high school.
Wow. So I guess, it's too early to ask, how it's been going, but I guess, how has it been going for 3 days?
Well, we're making a lot more smoothies than we had initially planned for. That's for sure. But, we really want to have the students and the teachers have a good experience with specialty coffee. And so we made sure that equipment was top of the line. We're still using East Pole coffee there. But in one of our opening parties, we served a line of maybe 200 faculty and staff, and they were getting cappuccinos and lattes and espresso shots. And we have a 3-group linea in there now, a linea AV, and it kept up with the volume. And we knew that we would have these concentrated times where we had to serve a whole lot of people who might be late to class. And so we made sure that we could handle with our systems and our equipment and our flow the volume that would come in at the beginning of school and middle school and maybe after school in these very concentrated time periods. And so far, it's been going great. My staff is incredible there. I have a manager for that location, just like I have a manager for the main Taproom location. And they are dedicated to making it work. I know that they're working their butts off right now, and it's about lunchtime, and they're going to get a line of maybe 20 or 30 kids who are coming for a drink that they'll pay for, in addition to the cafeteria food and drink that they get as part of their program. And so it's been a lot of fun, and I hope that the energy and the positive reception lasts through the whole school year and then for years to come.
Cool. And there's a steady stream of resumes that might come your way to Taproom once they graduate.
That would be great. I'll also encourage them to actually go off to university if that is what they are going to plan for.
So you've got a lot of things going on. And you've been through a lot of, different coffee shop opening experiences, and now through 6 years of your own in this new venture. Life doesn't seem like it's slowing down that much for you. And as an operator, I just heard you say that you have managers for each location, and that was going to be one of my questions is like, who's helping you in this? And, how this, I think this has to do with like work-life balance is, how you manage yourself as the owner so that you have the bandwidth to take on new projects and actually care for your people well without burning out. I wonder if you could talk about that. What are your secrets right now to being able to be available, have the bandwidth to handle it? What structures and what habits do you have that are keeping you going in the right direction?
Well, I think more than just tools and strategies right now, it goes back to how did I start the whole company? And I think it takes picturing from the start what ideal role your business will have in your life and what ideal role you will have in your business. And so for me, one aspect was that I wanted the business to financially provide for my family and for other pursuits and passions in life. And I wanted my role in the business to be one of a big picture, like not requiring me to be there to work every hour of operation. And so even though it was my goal, I knew, at least in the short run, I couldn't have that balance yet from the start. So yes, I did work 80 to 100 hour work weeks when we started, but that was just for the opening months. And And my wife and I knew it was unsustainable. I mean, I had 4 kids under the age of 5 when we opened Taproom's doors, and there's no way I could do 100-hour work weeks for years. And so we had to get the shop and the staff and our sales up to a place where I could feel okay leaving the shop in other people's hands and then go and spend time with my family. And really after 2 years of the business, because I had that foresight and that planning, after 2 years, I committed to no longer working nights and weekends. And now in our 6th year, I'm completely off of the regular barista shift schedule. I only cover bar shifts when it's absolutely necessary. But that kind of a balance comes at a cost. I mean, a real financial cost. I have to pay other people to work. I choose not to. And I have to have managers who can run the shops when I'm not there and do it at a level that maintains the quality and culture that I would want if I were the full-time manager on site. And so it takes planning all those moves from the start and making sure that you're sufficiently capitalized from the start, that you make payroll and pay bills and not fold after just 6 months of operation, or maybe have to close the doors because you feel like you have to spend more time with family and just kind of give up on the dream. But for me, I really do. I want to see my kids grow up. I want to not just have a passing presence in their lives. And so this year, my oldest girls, they're 11-year-old twins, they've been doing a homeschool program. And today was their first day of classes. And I'm in charge of being the homeschool teacher Wednesday of every week. So I have to be with them at home. At this time, I can't be behind the bar. I can't cover a shift or take care of a plumbing emergency. And in order to pull that off, my business, my management staff, everyone has to be in on the healthy maintenance of boundaries. You know, my staff gives that to me, and I give that to them in whatever personal situations and life balance they have. But really, through it all, you're asking who's that support. My wife is the biggest support in all that. And she's not just on the side supporting me. She actually is a very strong woman. She has a full-time job, and I have this full-time job, and together we raise our 4 kids. And this year we're going to be homeschooling, which all, as I'm saying, it sounds insane. But my wife and I mutually support each other in our passions and dreams. And so it's one where we're on the same team. We are very, very, very proactive in maintaining that healthiness of our personal lives and our marriage and our parenting. I am not ashamed to say I go see a counselor and just make sure that I'm talking through things and heading off things before they become problems. And so we're very active in being healthy in the craziness of life and approaching it with as much balance as we can. But coffee is not my primary identity. I say that to lots of people and they're surprised because they're like, no, you're Taproom. And I say, no, I'm Jonathan. and I have these other things that are part of who I am. And if it were all to fall apart now, still be Jonathan. I'd still be me and have my primary pursuits and passions in life.
Well, I love that. The mutual respect that you give to the employees in the same way that they give that to you. And the idea, like you just said, that coffee is not my identity. And I even read this tweet by Chris Baca recently. It said, you can give your all at work without giving all of you to work. And that seems like something that you've really embodied with how you run things. And I wonder, it seems like all of this stuff that is pulling you away from the shop, it is costing you more. It is, somewhat of a risk to step away because you're not in ultimate that control seat. But it sounds like it's ultimately for the benefit of the company.
Yeah, I would say it is. And it's not the route everyone would take. And I say that because really, for me, it has always been that big picture mentality. And the drive behind it is not to be this specialty coffee shop guru or, local king of a coffee empire or anything like that. And so when I view the coffee shop and its my ownership of it and everything correctly in the holistic picture, then I think that it is healthier. And not just for me having a good balance in life, but then people seeing, hey, this is a healthy company that takes care of people and prizes people over the product while still maintaining a good product. And so I think that people look in from the outside and they can respect that and they want to be a part of it. They want to support us with their dollars. They want to support us by saying, I'll go there for my daily cup of coffee. And for my staff, I want to be a place where even if they leave, when people see Taproom on the resume, they can say, oh man, you worked at Taproom? I heard that's a great place. And from the employment side and from the customer service side and the customer experience. So again, looking at all of it holistically, I think balance is a great thing to strive for and hopefully achieve without being laser focused on a certain aspect of the industry or the product or the business that would detract you from the bigger picture.
How have you grown personally since you started this company?
Oh, that's a big question. I would say that there was this time, probably in the second year of operating Taproom, where if I thought about myself at the time, I actually would say, okay, now I'm an adult. And maybe before that, I was like, yeah, I'm kind of, becoming an adult and entering into manhood or whatever it is. But I think a couple years in, I took stock and said, wow, like this experience that God's given me, it has really grown me as a person, matured in how to relate to people, being sure of myself and my identity, and that's rooted in faith for me. But having that big picture mentality to where I say, okay, like knowing that and growing in those core identity pieces has made me a better coffee shop owner and business owner. They're all interrelated. And I think using that foundation of faith and identity that transcends how good or how bad the coffee shop is performing, I'm able to say, okay, I'm growing, and it's in these ways that are not just growing in management or just growing in being a business person. So all that to say, I think I've really matured in some core ways, and been able to, from that, project a certain amount of, I think, warranted confidence, where I can invite others alongside the journey and say, I've learned these lessons. Hey, learn alongside with me. And that's just been the fun next step of saying, okay, like who can I bring alongside me in this journey? For the last 11 years, it's been my wife. And then, now with my kids as well. And I will be with that core crew, for forever, as long as we're living. And then others with professional relationship and church relationships and community relationships, I can say, yeah, come alongside us. There's fun things happening. Like, see what God's doing, see what's going on, and the fun things that are happening, even if it business folds, even if projects don't go like we expect them to. It's a really awesome journey.
So as we wrap up here, this has really been a great journey just in this last hour, talking to you about this company and how you've experienced your community and your own personal growth and the company growth. It's really been instructive for those looking to open coffee shops, as well as those currently trying to figure out how to manage what they currently have. I know this has been hugely helpful. Final advice to people that are coffee entrepreneurs, people that have coffee businesses. From your experience, what are the things that you think are the most helpful to focus on in order to live the dream in a way that it doesn't become a nightmare for them?
Wow, that also is a big question. I think it comes down to that whole identity piece. Place your identity in something unshakable. And again, for me, that's my identity in Jesus as a Christian. I don't see any way it could be better for me. But I've just seen so many people over the years place their identity in being a barista, or in their coffee business that they started, or in their success or job title. And when things don't go their way, they have an identity crisis or midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it. And I want to be able to say at the end of the day, if all my plans in this coffee shop all come tumbling down, I still know who I am. I still have purpose and fulfillment in life. And whatever God gives me next, I'll dive into that fully and strive to be a good steward of it for as long as he would have me do it. There's this great quote from a guy named Jim Elliott. It says, wherever you are, be all there. Live to the hilt every situation you believe to be the will of God. I think that's valuable advice for all of us, coffee business owner or not, to be a really good steward of what is laid before you right now. Do it to the best of your ability. But if it all falls apart, knowing your identity is not found in that one thing or in that project or in that business, because things will fail. Ultimately, all of it will in some way or another. It'll pass on to something else. The question at the end of the day is, are you still who you say you are, or who do you say you are? And are you grounded in that?
Wise words. So what is next for, I mean, I guess you're going to go over to the high school, see how things are going. What's next for you and your journey with Taproom?
Well, Taproom, this really is a new season. And now having 2 locations and trying to see how a new baby is going to grow up. So for me, I think we're going to truck along and really not look to expanding more from right now and see how it goes. And if another opportunity comes up down the road, echoing that. I think personally, I keep moving away from having to be behind the bar, really supporting and empowering my managers really well. I think that for the employees at Taproom, that's where they're going to see the biggest changes. So maybe not from the customer side, but I hope to pay people more. I hope to introduce more benefits and things like health insurance. And we've already introduced paid time off, paid breaks, and being able to approve 100% of vacation requests and things like that. And so I think that we're going to make strides towards lifting up the career barista and saying it's sustainable, that someone wants to be with my company. They could do that for years. They could support a family. They could buy a house. They can do that and still make coffee and not be just a barista job, but it is sustainable. And so I want to be able to do that for my employees. I think that those are the biggest plans moving forward, are ways that the customer won't necessarily see from the outside, but we're working on a whole lot behind the scenes. And I'll continue to watch my kids grow up and be a part of their lives and homeschool every Wednesday.
I love it. So where can we go to find out more about your business and stay in touch with it?
Well, we're most active on Instagram, probably at Taproom Coffee. We have a website as well, taproomcoffee.com. And really anyone can reach out to me anytime. Jonathan at taproomcoffee.com or info at taproomcoffee.com. It all goes to me for now until I get a social media manager or anything like that. Yeah. But people can reach out if they have any questions about me. I'd love to chat with anyone about their journeys as well.
Well, Jonathan, I really appreciated this, you joining us and hearing your heart for your community, for your business, for your family. It's really been inspiring. Thank you so much for taking the time to lay all this before us. It's been hugely helpful.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Well, again, I'm just so happy to have had an opportunity to talk with Jonathan. As we talked about this in the introduction, but the through line of pursuing a joy-filled life that has a balance between what drives you as a person and what's required for you as a professional, or what you believe is required for you as a professional. This is obviously something that has been consistent in Jonathan's life as an owner, and you can feel that lack of stress in the coffee bar when you go in. I believe that if the owner is stressed out and compromising on personal integrity with the things that are important to them in their life, that stress is going to just bleed over into the management and management to staff and then to the customers. And I love that Jonathan has pursued this balance because it trickles down into the way you experience the coffee and the beer in his spot. And if there's anything that we can learn from this conversation, I think obviously there's so much stuff we can learn, but the big thing is that you have to be internally consistent and make sure that you're taking care of the things that are very important to you, and not just throwing them on the altar of business success. And I'm really glad that Jonathan has that emphasis in what he does and talked about it in this conversation. And obviously, there's so much more that was mentioned that I would encourage you to, again, maybe re-listen to this episode. You can also sign up to be on the Keys to the Shop email list, because every week we give you the transcript from the interviews or podcast, and in that transcript you can just search for the details of what was talked about, and that's in PDF form. That's sent exclusively to those who are on the Keys to the Shop email list, as well as bonus audio and other resources that I find around the internet and elsewhere that will help you in your professional journey. You can find that over at keystotheshop.com. Just scroll down to the bottom of the page and you can put your information in, and you'll be signed up to receive that email. Now, if you want to find out more about Taproom Coffee and Beer, you can simply visit their website over at taproomcoffee.com. Over on Instagram also, that is Taproom Coffee. A huge thank you to Jonathan for taking the time to talk with me at such a stressful time in a sense, because his second shop, the one in the high school, was just opening that day, and in the midst of that, he decided to come on the show and share with us and be generous with his experiences. So thanks again, Jonathan, for being a guest at Keys to the Shop and helping us become better professionals. If you want to reach out to me, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com with all your comments, questions, or feedback, things like that. You can also DM me over on Instagram. The handle is just @KeysToTheShop. Be sure, if you have not yet followed Keys to the Shop on Instagram, be sure to do so. We've got some things in the works that we'll be introducing to the Instagram stories as well. Hopefully by year's end, I will get that worked into my schedule throughout the week. Follow us on Instagram. Reach out, chris@keystotheshop.com. Be sure to sign up for the Keys to the Shop email list to get the transcript and bonus audio and other resources. And have an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope, as always, that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.